conquering shame. Welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to helping you live a life of truth and share your fullest gifts with the world. I'm your host, Pete Byrne, and I'm here to open your mind to new perspectives, to introduce you to some epic humans who are already out there living their deepest truth. So now just grounding in, taking a breath, letting go of anything you're still holding onto from today, and just opening up to receiving this episode now. Let's dive on in. Welcome to this solo episode of the Alive and Aligned podcast on conquering shame. So, we're going to dive into what is shame, how does it show up, and what can you do to get out of shame? How can you rewrite the stories? Shame is something that, honestly, it's not something that is talked about very openly or honestly. Like, oh, I feel ashamed that I did that. Like, maybe you might hear that sometimes, but in general, it's not something that we look at life through the lens of very often. We don't think about, oh, that's shame, he's showing shame. It's more something that operates in the shadows. It's usually something that's deep at the core of a lot of the surface level behaviors that we're seeing in people. And we're going to dive into that. So shame, it's a low frequency emotion. It's really dense. It's really heavy. It's there for a reason, like all or most of the things we have in our human body. It served some kind of survival purpose. Most likely, in a tribe situation when we've got a community and a group of people, we want to do things that are in harmony with the group. And if we were doing things that were not in harmony with the group, we might be exiled or thrown out and abandoned and left to die. So one of the deepest fears of a human is to be, abandoned and effectively left to die. And as a result, ancestors in the past who did not feel shame, did some pretty probably epic and gnarly things and got ostracized. So in the long run, we've developed this ability to feel shame, and that stops us and kind of keeps us in check from doing these undesirable behaviors that will make us exiled from our community. So how I like to think about shame on an embodied level is think of like a magical rock that sits in the stomach, and it's quite weightless, in the day-to-day until it's activated. And once this magical shame rock is activated, it expands to like 30 times the size and takes on this massive weight, and it basically floors us. The way that happens is we've got a trigger. There's an external event that happens. There's information that comes in, and whatever about it, it triggers and brings alive this rock inside of us. And it might be something really simple. Like you could be, with a group of friends, or you could be at, a work meeting, and you might suggest an idea. You might say, oh, hey, I had this really cool idea. I think we should do this. What do you think? And everyone might go, no, I don't like that. No, let's not do that. Now, that's just information, which is just feedback on, you've stated a preference or suggested something, and you've received information and a response that it doesn't work for those specific people at that time. However, if we're going to look at it through the lens of an old program of shame, the processing of that information might look something like, oh, they didn't like my idea. Oh, I can't believe I asked that question or suggested that. Oh no, they don't like me. Oh, they don't accept me. They don't like what I have to offer. Oh, that must mean that I am not enough. It must mean I am unworthy and that I shouldn't be here and no one likes me. And I'm probably going to die alone in the bush like my, ancestors would have done. So this is where we start to see a downward spiral of shame, where we've got an external event that might actually be quite, not a big deal, and we make a big deal out of it. And we have to realize that in that moment, no one is shaming us. It's just we're activating and recreating an old embodied pattern or feeling of shame that's stored deep in the body. Now, how the magical shame rock gets there is usually in a more early developmental stage, like 0 to 7 vibes, where we are, a young child and we have an experience of being maybe rejected or not accepted for who we are. We're, naive and innocent in ourselves, and we show up and we express an emotion, or we do something that we think is like innocent and totally normal and part of our human nature. And then someone turns around, usually an adult, maybe our parents or someone else, turns around and goes, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Don't express that emotion. Don't ever do that thing. That's bad. Only bad people do that. This is shaming. This is where we start to believe that inherently a part of us, of our natural true selves, is wrong or bad. Okay? It could also happen where, you're at the supermarket and, your dad forgets you and he comes back 15 minutes later. So in that moment, we might feel abandoned and rejected and feel like, oh, it's because I'm not good enough. Now, if he loved me and if I was worthy of his love, then he would have not forgotten me. Or, my mom is never home. She's always working. It's because I'm not good enough. Through that egocentric view of that 4-year-old, that's the only meaning they can make on that information. They don't have the full picture just yet. So that gets stored and embodied, and over time gets to start creating surface level patterns. So if I believe I'm not enough, I'm going to start to prove to myself externally that I am. So I'm going to maybe get really good at pleasing people and, winning people's approval to, feel good about myself, to get validation so that, oh, look, I am enough. Look at these people who like me. That can also translate into having a complex around becoming super overly successful in business or any other field, really. Just trying to prove and gain power and acceptance from others that, oh, wow, look at that guy. He's so successful. That we never have to touch that rock because we've created such a strong framework around the outside of us in our lives that it just doesn't happen. It doesn't really come up. Or so we think. But of course, we can't run forever because it's an inside job. If you've got embodied shame of some sort, then the fear of touching that becomes bigger and bigger, the greater the resistance and the blocks that we build up against it. So if I've created this amazing, amazing life, there can still be something small that triggers the rock and it all comes crashing down. And it doesn't matter what I've created on the external if the internal ain't right. So here's an analogy of how instead of trying to, bypass and avoid and repress your shame, you can actually work with it, okay? And you can go from maybe feeling not enough and unworthy and not stepping fully into your power, or being too much in your power and maybe being overly domineering on others and trying to prove yourself to the world instead of just being able to chill and enjoy life, and because of the avoidance of this embodied shame. So think of shame at this point like a big owl swamp monster that's hiding down in a pit. And the swamp monster represents kind of like a shame loop. So when we drop into that negative downward spiral, that is in effect the swamp monster coming to life. And if you don't realize that the swamp monster has come out of his pit and grabbed your leg and he's starting to pull you down into it. Now, if you don't realize, you might just be chilling and next thing you know, you're in this dark pit of despair and you don't know what to do, which is pretty scary. And then you no way out. You don't know how you got in here, what's going on. The first thing to do is realize that you've been pulled into the pit by the shame swamp monster, okay? And at any point, you can take back your power from this emotion and this swamp monster and get out of the pit and kick him off your leg and say, nope, I'm getting out of here. It can be hard because, this state of shame can really bring us into almost like a long depressive state. It's heavy. It's really challenging. And might even feel inescapable. But realizing that you have the power to break this by stepping into action is really the most important thing. So the first step in breaking the shame spiral is that action. It's creating a sense of autonomy. It's looking for cues in your external environment how actually I am in control. I am in my power. I don't, what's going on here? I don't need to be in this pit. And almost like breaking that cycle as it's happening. The second way to more permanently start breaking these shame spirals is to start looking at what's underneath. So what's that deep belief or that deep fear or deep feeling that you're holding on to? Like that fear of, I'm unworthy, I'm not enough. Making those conscious and becoming aware of them so you can spot them when they start to show up in your life. And you start to take really information that doesn't really give much signaling to that and start seeing where you're making it about your shame. And the third and final step really is about getting rid of this forever. It's about doing that deep embodied work to work with that magical shame rock in your stomach and starting to chip away and let go of that. That energy of shame that's held down in these lower centers of the body. It's a dense frequency. But once we start to tap into it and integrate these experiences, like I use connected breathwork, it's a really great tool. There's other modalities, of course. You can explore different somatic practices, your somatic experiencing or your yoga, plant medicine. Some people go down that route. And it's basically just about going back and feeling these old experiences where you felt ashamed, particularly in early development. And then getting to realize that, oh, I felt this way because of this, but it's actually not happening anymore, okay? So at that moment, I felt unworthy. The meaning I made about that story when my dad left me at the supermarket was that I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy, which is very shameful. So once we start to rewrite that story, we go, oh, no, he was just forgetful and, he had his own flaws and he wasn't really perfect. But it's all good. We're here now and, at the end of the day, I was loved and accepted for who I was. And, that's not really true. So I can let go of that deep fear of I'm unworthy and I can reintegrate that experience and let go of some of that rock. The more we do that, it really starts to lighten the load. And the grip that shame monster can get on our leg is much, much lighter. It has less ability to pull us down and really leave us stranded down that hole for many days in a row. And what starts to happen is, as we start to let go of these deeper experiences of embodied shame, it starts to literally change who we are and how we are in the world and how people are receiving us. I've had experiences where in this breathwork training I did 2 years ago, right, where I was just cruising along being myself, and the only variable that was changing was I was doing this training and doing this deep embodied work, letting go of these old programs and emotions. And I had 2 journeys where I really tapped into a deep sense of I fucking hate myself. I'm such a piece of shit. I'm so unworthy. And I re-experienced that and let it go and felt all the feelings and moved it. And it was pretty difficult, at the time. It was challenging, but I was like, all right, I'm here for it. Let's go. And at the beginning, I didn't really see much. I felt lighter, but I was like, okay, cool. And then what started to happen in the weeks after was previously there would have been women that I was kind of interested in and I would have maybe messaged or, gone up to and talked to, but they just really weren't into me. They were just whatever, and it was almost like it just wasn't a thing, even though there was a desire there for me. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we're talking a couple of weeks after this experience, these women start messaging me and coming up to me and going, hey, so good to see you, and almost they didn't recognize me, I was a new person. That was the extent of the shift that was happening. And I didn't do anything else in my life different. It was this was the only thing that happened. I had 2 big journeys where I explored shame and let go of that and integrated that. So I've personally seen the power of this, of how crippling and crushing shame can be, how it can be influencing all these other, behaviors on the surface and emotions that we're having, and the need to almost set up and control our lives around avoiding this big shame rock instead of just going straight for the jugular of feeling it, moving it, and then just being free to be fully ourselves. And that's what really it's all about. It's about being safe and free to be all of you and no longer believing that a part of you is unlovable or unworthy or just not welcome, because let's be honest, all of you is welcome, even the weird bits. Seriously. So, closing out this episode with an invitation to find yourself, first of all, the awareness to, and maybe some kind of just, tuning in meditation practice and presence practice to be able to notice the times that you're dropping into a shame spiral and that the monster is getting you and that rock is really weighing you down, and getting to break that and choose a new way in the moment, empowering yourself, finding new information that's going to prove a different story. The second thing, and the most important, is really doing that deep embodied work. So diving in and finding the ways that you can let go of these deeper experiences hiding in the, darker parts of the psyche and in the subconscious. And in doing that, in letting go on a mind and body basis, you're going to start to open up new pathways that you never even dreamed were possible. And the energetics are going to show that to you in your life. Happy shame hunting, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you next time.